The cursor blinked on my screen like a heartbeat I couldn't match. My thesis draft sprawled unfinished, words blurring under the strain of nights without sleep. Deadline tomorrow, and the weight of it pressed down, hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the desk. This campus town felt colder than ever, an isolated stretch of brick buildings and empty fields where I'd come chasing dreams that now seemed to slip away. Losing this degree meant losing everything, the years invested, the fragile path forward. I couldn't let it end like this. Pulse thudding like distant thunder, I stood outside her office door in the dim hallway. Knocked. Her voice came from inside, calm and steady, pulling me in despite the fear knotting my stomach. The door opened and the air shifted, thick with unspoken weight. I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me. Dr. Sophia Reyes's office smelled of old paper and fresh coffee, stacks of books leaning like silent guards on every shelf. Her desk lamp cast a warm glow over scattered notes, the kind of focused chaos that made the room feel alive, even in the late hour. She sat there, pen in hand, marking a paper with precise strokes. Sophia was in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back simply, glasses perched on her nose. She looked up, and her gaze held mine, unflinching, like she could see the exhaustion I tried to bury under a straight posture. "Jordan," she said, setting the pen down. Her voice was low, measured, the kind that filled the space without effort. "What brings you here this late?" I swallowed, my throat dry. Words tumbled out in a stammer. I need an extension. On the thesis. Just a week. The research hit a wall and I can't... I stopped, eyes dropping to her hands, still and capable, resting on the desk. They weren't shaking like mine would have been. She leaned back in her chair, the wood creaking softly. Her eyes paused on my face, reading the lines I hadn't noticed forming around my eyes. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I did, the vinyl cool against my legs. The silence stretched, heavy, until she spoke again. "You've been pushing hard. I see it in your work. But extensions aren't given lightly." I nodded, staring at the floor. The dorm waited empty back in my room, nights blending into one long stretch of isolation. No family nearby, just the hum of the fridge and the wind rattling the windows in this forgotten corner of the state. "I know, but if I don't finish, it's over. Everything I've built here." My voice cracked a little, and I hated it. Sophia's lamp glowed steadily, the only light piercing the gathering dark outside. She adjusted her glasses, a small movement that drew my eye to the curve of her wrist. "Loneliness does that," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Makes the work feel heavier. Your drafts show it, the drive, but the edges fraying." I looked up, surprised. How did she know? Her office felt like hers alone. No photos of family, just books and papers. The solitary lamp suggested long hours, echoes in a home I imagined as quiet as my dorm. "It's hard being here sometimes," I admitted, the words slipping out. "The town closes in. No one to talk to after the classes end." She nodded, her expression softening just a fraction. The air between us thickened, not uncomfortable, but charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "I understand that more than you might think," she said, her voice wrapping around the words. Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long, unflinching, pulling at something I hadn't named. Then she leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "An extension. Possible, but with a condition." Her tone dropped lower, deliberate. "You'll work with me, one-on-one, late sessions, no distractions. I guide you through it, step by step, under my watch." My breath caught. The offer hung there, simple on the surface, but laced with something heavier. Her presence filled the room, the faint scent of her coffee mixing with the paper. I felt the pull, taut in my chest, imagining those hours close, her voice steady beside me. Loneliness echoed in the space, mine and perhaps hers. The lamp's glow, a shared secret against the dark. Yes, I said, nodding. The agreement formed, pulling me into late nights under her watch, the boundary between student and something else already blurring in the hush. Her words settled into the quiet, deliberate as the pen she'd set aside. "Work closely," Sophia repeated, her voice low, threading through the air like smoke. "One-on-one. No distractions from the world outside these walls. You'll come here after hours, every evening until it's done. I'll walk you through the revisions myself, line by line." She pushed back from the desk slightly, her chair scraping the floor with a soft rasp. The lamp's light caught the edge of her glasses, making her eyes sharper, more intent. I nodded, my body going taut, muscles pulling tight across my shoulders. The pull of her presence hit like gravity, steady and unyielding, drawing me forward even as I sat still. Her office felt smaller now, the stacks of books closing in, the faint coffee scent wrapping around us. I could feel the heat from her side of the desk, a subtle warmth that made the room's chill retreat. "That sounds intensive," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. But the idea lodged in me, those evenings under her guidance, her focus solely on my work, and maybe on me. She reached for a folder on the corner of her desk, thick with marked-up drafts from other students. As she slid it toward me, her sleeve brushed my arm. The fabric soft, a fleeting pressure that sent a jolt through my skin. I froze, the contact lingering in my mind longer than it did on my flesh. Her hand withdrew slowly, fingers curling around the edge of the folder. "These are examples," she said, tapping the cover. "See how persistence shapes the argument? You'll need that." Her gaze flicked to my face, holding there, unflinching. I took the folder, our fingers nearly touching again, the air between them humming. The dim light from the lamp painted shadows across her desk, softening the lines of her face, making the silence feel shared rather than empty. I opened it, flipping through pages dense with her notes, red ink precise, probing. My eyes lifted to hers, and she was watching me, a subtle curve at the corner of her mouth. "You stare when you read," she said quietly, her tone even but laced with something warmer. "Focused. It's compelling." Heat crept up my neck, but I didn't look away. The comment hung there, simple, yet it echoed the loneliness I'd carried into the room. Empty weekends stretched in my mind, nights in the dorm with only the glow of my screen, the campus paths silent under gray skies, this town too small to hold connections that lasted. "It's all I have right now," I admitted, closing the folder. "The work, the quiet. Weekends come and it's just nothing. No one calls. The fields outside the window don't change." Sophia's expression shifted, her eyes softening as she leaned back. The chair creaked again, a small sound in the hush. "I know those voids," she said, her voice dropping lower, almost confessional. "Long hours here, then home to the same. Echoes in the kitchen, the kind that follow you to bed." She paused, adjusting her glasses with a steady hand, the movement drawing my gaze to the faint lines at her temples, marks of her own solitary grind. No rings on her fingers, no framed lives on the walls. Just this space, her anchor in the isolation. The admission bridged something between us, the air thickening with it. Her presence felt closer, the brush of her sleeve still a ghost on my arm. Loneliness echoed back, not just mine, but hers, mirroring in the dim light. I felt seen, the exhaustion I'd hidden laid bare without judgment. "So, we start tomorrow," she said, breaking the moment, but her eyes held the warmth. 8 sharp, bring your draft." I stood, the folder heavy in my hands, the pull of her words and her settling deep. The first session began in my mind already, the clock ticking toward those quiet hours, her guidance a thread pulling me back. The campus fell silent after dark, paths empty under the sodium lights, the town beyond a distant hum of trucks on the highway. Sophia's office became our bubble, warm light spilling from the window like a secret against the black field stretching out. I arrived at 8 the next evening, draft clutched under my arm, the chill clinging to my coat. She was already there, sleeves rolled up, paper spread across the desk. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner, filling the air with its bitter edge, cutting through the musty scent of archived journals. "Sit," she said, not looking up at first, her pen scratching notes. I pulled the chair close, the wood scraping softly. We started with the outline, her voice sharp as she pointed out gaps. "Here," she murmured, leaning in, her finger tracing a line on my paper. The heat from her arm brushed my shoulder, close enough that I felt the warmth seep through my shirt. Her skin was cool from the room's draft, but the proximity made everything sharper, the paper crinkling under her touch. I nodded, scribbling revisions, but my focus splintered. Her guidance cut through the fog in my head, precise, pulling threads together I'd let unravel. "Persistence," she said low, her breath stirring the air near my ear. "It's not just words on a page. It's holding on when the quiet presses in." Her eyes lifted then, lingering on my clenched jaw, the muscle tight from hours of strain. The look held a sultry edge, not overt, but weighted, like she saw the tension coiling deeper than the work. We worked past 9. The clocks ticked, the only sound besides our turning pages. She poured coffee midway, black and steaming, handing me a mug. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, a fleeting graze that sent a spark up my arm. "You take it strong," she noted, her voice softening as she settled back beside me. The steam curled between us, and for a moment we sipped in silence, the warmth spreading through my chest. It felt like connection, small but real, cutting the isolation that had shadowed my days. As the hours stretched, voices eased. She asked about the research snag, not just academically, but how it sat with me. The late nights alone, the dorm's empty walls echoing my thoughts. "I stare at the ceiling sometimes," I admitted, setting the mug down. "The wind rattles the panes, and it's like the world's forgotten this place." Sophia nodded, her hand pausing on a page. "The fields do that. They swallow sound. My house backs onto them. Same quiet, night after night." Her words carried a quiet ache, mirroring mine, the shared confession warming the space more than the lamp. I watched her then, unable to stop. She adjusted her glasses, pushing them up with a steady finger, the curve of her wrist exposed in the light, veins faint under pale skin. An internal ache bloomed, not just from fatigue, but from the pull of her focus. The way she leaned close again, her knee brushing mine under the desk. No apology, just the contact lingering, heat building in the narrow gap. We debated a section, her low laugh escaping when I pushed back stubbornly. "You fight for it," she said, eyes glinting. "That fire, it's rare here." Forgotten meals came up around 11. She pulled sandwiches from a drawer, wrapped in foil, the crinkle loud in the hush. We ate side by side, knees touching now, the bread dry but the moment soft. Her voice dropped over bites, sharing a story from her early days. Long hours in dim libraries, the loneliness of chasing tenure alone. "It carves you out," she said, wiping her hands. "But nights like this, they fill edges back in." The comment hung, sultry in its undertone, her gaze flicking to my mouth before returning to the paper. The session wound down near midnight, revisions stacking up, progress solid under her watch. But a pause stretched as she reviewed the last page, her hand stilling on the desk, inches from mine. The air thickened with what wasn't said, the heat from her skin, the steady rhythm of her breathing syncing with mine. Loneliness felt distant then, replaced by this charged quiet, her presence a tether in the dark. Days blurred into evenings, the campus clock tower chiming 8 like a ritual. Sophia's office pulled me back each night, the doors creak a signal that the world outside had faded. We dove into the thesis deeper now, her questions slicing past the text, probing the choices behind my words. "Why this angle?" she'd ask, her voice steady, eyes locking on mine until I felt exposed. Not just academically, but raw. The work sharpened under her, arguments tightening like knots pulled firm. But the hours unearthed more than revisions. One session, we debated a core section, voices rising in the lamplight. Her palm pressed flat on the table near mine, fingers splayed, the heat radiating across the wood. I mirrored the gesture without thinking, our hands inches apart, the space between humming with tension. "You push back," she said, her tone low, approving. The contact stayed, neither of us shifting, her skin's warmth a quiet anchor during the clash. I felt the pull, taut in my veins, her presence making the debate feel intimate, charged. Loneliness confessed in fragments as we worked. I'd mention uprooted roots, leaving a small coastal town for this inland sprawl. Family calls that grew shorter. The dorm's silence amplifying doubts. "It's like starting over every day," I said one night, pen pausing mid-note. Sophia nodded, her guarded past surfacing in echoes. "I came here chasing tenure, left a city life that chewed me up. Partners who wanted the shine, not the grind." Her words hung, sparse but heavy, revealing cracks in her steady facade. No details, just the outline of isolation that mirrored mine. Her low laugh came during my stubborn points, a sound that wrapped around the room like smoke. "There," she'd say, head tilting, the vibration lingering in the air. It cut the focus, softening the edges, her amusement drawing me closer. The lamp hummed steadily overhead, a constant drone blending with our breaths. Her faint perfume, something clean like linen and citrus, cut through the stale air of stacked papers and cooling coffee, sharpening every inhale, making the space feel alive with her. Evenings stretched, revisions piling up, but the thesis felt secondary sometimes. She'd lean in to correct a margin, her shoulder brushing mine, the fabric of her blouse soft against my arm. No pull away, just the press lingering, heat building in the narrow gap. "Your mind works like this," she'd murmur, tracing a phrase with her finger, close enough that her breath grazed my cheek. The sultry edge in her voice pulled at me, turning guidance into something personal. Her focus, a spotlight on the ache I'd buried. Frustration peaked one night around 10, the draft resisting a key pivot. I slammed the pen down, words failing, the weight crashing back. "It's not coming together," I muttered, rubbing my temples, the room's confines pressing in. Sophia stilled, then reached across, her hand covering the back of mine briefly, palm warm and firm. "Breathe," she said softly, her thumb grazing my knuckle before withdrawing. The touch turned the tension inward, coiling deep, her closeness amplifying the frustration into something sharper, unspoken. Her eyes held mine, unflinching, the air thick with the shift, pulling us toward whatever came next. The touch lingered on my skin long after her hand withdrew, a ghost of warmth that twisted the frustration deeper. We sat there, the desk between us cluttered with half-revised pages, the lamp's hum the only steady thing in the room. My thesis snag hit harder then, a core argument crumbling under scrutiny, sources that refused to align no matter how I twisted them. I pushed the paper away, elbows on the table, head dropping into my hands. "It's falling apart," I said, voice muffled. "All of it. The research, the structure. If I can't fix this, what's the point of any of it?" Sophia didn't move at first, her chair still. Then she shifted, the wood creaking softly, and I felt her gaze settle on me, heavy but not pressing. "Look at me," she said, quietly, her tone pulling without force. I lifted my head, meeting her eyes, dark, unflinching, but softened at the edges, like the light had reached something guarded there. The exhaustion I'd carried spilled out then, raw and unfiltered. "It's not just the work," I admitted, the words tumbling. "This place, it's isolated me. The dorm's empty, the town's too small for anyone to stick around. I came here thinking I'd build something, but now it's just me against the quiet. Nights when the wind howls off the fields, and I wonder if anyone's even noticing I'm here." Her expression shifted, the lines around her mouth easing as she absorbed it. She leaned forward, forearms resting on the desk, closing the gap without touching. The air between us felt thinner, charged with the admission. "Isolation carves deep," she said, her voice low, threading through the space. "I see it in your revisions, the drive fighting the fray. But you're holding." Her eyes held mine, the praise carrying a sultry weight, lingering too long, pulling at the ache in my chest. It wasn't just encouragement. It wrapped around me, warm and intent, making the room's confines feel intimate rather than confining. She reached for a book from the shelf behind her, A worn volume on archival methods, its spine cracked from use. As she passed it over, her hand brushed mine, deliberate or not, the contact sparking quiet fire along my fingers. The warmth spread, lingering where our skin met, her palm rougher than I'd imagined from years of turning pages and gripping pens. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The book sat between us, open to a marked section. But the moment stretched, the silence deepening into something shared. For the first time, it didn't echo empty. The quiet held us both, a bridge over the voids we'd named. Sophia set the book down slowly, her fingers trailing the edge before withdrawing. "That resilience," she murmured, her gaze flicking back to mine, holding with that same sultry pull. "It's not common. Most fold under the weight here, the long hauls, the solitary grind." She paused, her own vulnerability surfacing in the hush, eyes drifting to the window where the campus lights flickered dimly. "My home's much the same. Echoes in the halls after dark, the clock ticking alone in the kitchen. Years of it. Building walls around the work because letting in the quiet, it asks too much." The confession hung there, sparse but real, mirroring my isolation without pity. I felt the connection deepen, the air warming with it. Her presence no longer just guidance, but a tether. We returned to the snag then, her hand gesturing over the page, but the brush earlier echoed, the fire it sparked coiling low. Silence fell again as we revised, but now it wrapped us, shared and steady, the loneliness retreating to the edges. Outside, thunder rumbled distant, clouds gathering over the fields. Rain began to patter the window, mirroring the shift inside. The storm pulling us closer in the lamp's steady glow, boundaries softening with every drop. Rain lashed the windows harder now, sheets of it blurring the campus lights into hazy streaks. We hunched over the revisions, voices dropping to whispers amid the storm's roar, the office a cocoon against the downpour. Sophia's pen scratched softly, underlining a phrase I'd wrestled into place, her arm close enough that the heat from her body cut through the room's damp chill. The thunder rolled low, vibrating the desk, but our focus held, tight and shared, the thesis finally bending under our combined push. I glanced up, catching her profile in the lamp's glow, jaw set but eyes distant, like the rain stirred something deeper. "These sessions," she said suddenly, her voice barely rising above the patter, "they're filling voids I didn't even name before." The words hung there, raw, her pen stilling on the page. She didn't look at me, but the admission cracked the air, her steady breath quickening just a fraction, close enough that I felt it brush my cheek. My response came raw, unfiltered, body leaning in without thought, drawn by the pull in her tone. "Me too," I whispered, the confession spilling out like the rain outside. The quiet used to swallow me whole. But here, with you, it's different. The hours don't echo anymore. Her breath steadied, warm and even, sinking with mine in the narrow space, the scent of wet earth seeping through the cracks, mixing with her faint linen sharpness. The world narrowed to that, her nearness, the storm's rhythm mirroring the thud in my chest. We turned back to the paper, but the tension hummed, unresolved. "This line," she murmured, her finger pointing to a tangled argument, voice low and intent. Mine joined hers, grazing the page at the same spot, skin meeting skin in a fleeting spark. The touch lingered, electric, neither pulling away, her fingertip warm against mine, tracing the ink as if mapping something unspoken. I felt the jolt race up my arm, coiling low, her gaze flicking to the contact, holding there with a sultry weight that made the rain fade. Loneliness transformed in that graze, twisting into something alive, urgent. The voids we'd named earlier, empty dorms, echoing homes, receded, replaced by this charged bridge between us. Her hand shifted then, covering mine fully, palm pressing down with quiet firmness, the world narrowing to the press of her skin, the lamp's hum, the downpour sealing us in. Time stretched, her thumb brushing my knuckle once, slow, deliberate, sending quiet fire through me. No words, just the hold. Her eyes lifting to mine, unflinching, pulling me deeper into the hush. The storm peaked, wind rattling the panes, but inside the air thickened further, heavy with the shift. She withdrew her hand slowly, fingers trailing off mine, leaving the warmth to echo. Jordan, she said softly, the name wrapping around the space like a secret. I met her gaze, heart thudding, the boundary blurring in the dim light, student and mentor dissolving into something rawer, unnamed. Words faltered on my tongue, the confession hanging unfinished, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that promised more, the rain a steady backdrop to whatever crossed that line next. The rain eased by morning, leaving the campus paths slick and gleaming under a pale sun. I woke in my dorm, the echo of her hand on mine still warm on my skin, pulling me through the fog of half-sleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Simple words from Sophia. Coffee before class? The pull in them hit hard, unassuming but insistent, like her voice in the quiet. I typed back yes, the screen's glow cutting the dim room, my pulse quickening at the thought of seeing her outside the office's hush. We met at the edge of the quad, steam rising from paper cups in our hands, the chill air sharp against my cheeks. The campus felt emptier in the early light, leaves skittering across the grass like scattered thoughts. She handed me the cup, her fingers grazing mine in the exchange, the contact brief but deliberate, warmth lingering as we started walking. Shoulders brushed with each step, the fabric of her coat soft against my arm, syncing our strides without a word. The town beyond the gates stirred faintly, trucks rumbling distant, fields misted white, but here the path narrowed to us, the closeness, a quiet claim after the night's blur. You move like you're carrying the draft still, she said low, her voice teasing the wind, eyes flicking to my legs as we crossed the quad. The observation carried a sultry edge, not mocking, but weighted, pulling my gaze to hers. I felt exposed under it, the chill forgotten, her words wrapping around the space between our steps. We didn't touch more then, but the brush of her arm against mine echoed the rain's intimacy, heat building in the cold morning air, unspoken but steady. Deeper talks wove in as days passed, the grind of classes and revisions a backdrop to what surfaced. One afternoon, we lingered on a bench by the library, the stone cold under us, her knee pressing mine as she shifted. Dreams get deferred here, she murmured, staring at the empty paths. The tenure track chews them up, connections you crave, buried under stacks and deadlines. Her hand rested on the bench near mine, fingers close enough to feel the faint tremor in the air. I nodded, the words hitting my own ache. I left a life by the coast for this, I said, voice low. Friends fading, family calls that end too quick. But the grind? It makes you want something real amid it all. Her eyes met mine, unflinching, the shared craving thickening the chill, her presence cutting through like the sun breaking mist. Touch lingered in those moments, arm against arm on the bench, the pressure firm, warmth seeping through layers, anchoring the talks. She'd lean in during a pause, her breath visible in the cold, voice dropping as she shared fragments of her past. A partner who chased city lights, leaving her to the quiet fields. It hollows you, she said one evening, our hands brushing as we walked back from class, the contact sparking without retreat. The sultry undercurrent in her tone pulled at me, turning confessions into threads binding us tighter, loneliness receding with every graze. Her texts came more often now, simple pulls. Meet after seminar? Or just my name, Jordan, with a time. They drew me across the quad, into shared silences that felt full, her observation of my stride, or the way I held the coffee cup laced with that teasing warmth. The connection we craved bloomed amid the grind, dreams deferred surfacing not as losses, but as bridges, her guarded hopes mirroring mine, the touches a quiet promise against the isolation. But as the deadline neared, her concern mixed with something heavier, unspoken. One walk, the wind sharper, she paused mid-step, hand on my arm, fingers pressing firm. It's close now, she said, eyes searching mine, the weight in her voice pulling deeper than the chill. The thesis loomed, but so did we. The boundary crossed, the risk settling heavy in the air between us. The final draft night arrived like a held breath finally released. The office felt thicker than ever, air heavy with the scent of cooling coffee and ink drying on fresh pages. We'd pushed through the last revisions that afternoon, my hand steady under her guidance. But now, alone again after hours, the thesis sat bound on the desk between us. Sophia flipped through it slowly, her fingers trailing the edges, eyes scanning lines she'd shaped as much as I had. The lamp hummed low, casting shadows that danced across her face, highlighting the faint tension in her jaw. "It's strong," she said finally, closing the cover with a soft thud. Her voice carried praise, but laced with heat, the words wrapping around the room like her gaze on mine. She leaned back, chair creaking, but her eyes didn't leave me, unflinching, pulling deeper into the quiet. I stood by the window, arms crossed against the chill seeping through the glass, the campus dark and still beyond. The deadline loomed at dawn, submission by morning, but the real weight pressed elsewhere, in the space we'd carved out these weeks. I turned to her, the words spilling before I could trap them. "This pull, it's not just the work anymore." My voice dropped, raw in the hush. "The loneliness I carried in here, it's met in your gaze. These nights, your hand near mine, the way you see through the fray. I feel it, Sophia. Beyond the thesis, beyond the grade." The confession hung there, exposed, my chest tight with the risk of it. Her presence filled the room, the faint linen scent cutting the stale air, her steady breath the only rhythm against my thudding pulse. She hesitated, her hand rising to adjust her glasses, a small delay that stretched the moment. The lamp's light caught the tremor in her fingers, subtle, but there, mirroring the shift in her eyes, guarded walls cracking under the weight. "Jordan," she whispered, voice sultry in its low timbre, threading through the quiet like a secret. "What we risk here, it's not small. This town whispers, the department watches. Power lines blur, reputations fray. But the quiet between us, it's dangerous because it's real." Her words pulled at me, weighted with the heat of admission, her gaze holding mine too long, unflinching, the air thickening with the unspoken fire. I stepped closer, the desk no longer a barrier, my knee brushing hers as I sat on the edge. The contact sparked, heat blooming where fabric met, neither of us shifting. "I know the risk," I said, leaning in, her breath warm on my cheek. "The isolation we both carry, empty homes, echoing halls, it led here, to this thread between us. I could walk away after submission, grades in hand, back to the dorm silence. But staying, not for the degree. For you. For the connection that fills the voids." My hand found the desk near hers, fingers inches apart, the pull taut like a wire ready to snap. Sophia's hand moved then, rising to my shoulder, firm and trembling, anchoring the moment with its press. Her palm warmed through my shirt, thumb grazing the collarbone's edge, a suggestive hold that sent quiet fire down my spine. The touch lingered, her eyes searching mine, the sultry edge in her whisper turning inward. "You're choosing more than work," she murmured, voice low, breath steady but quickened. "And I've felt it too. The way your focus draws me, the resilience in your stare. Loneliness ends in these hours, but crossing this, us, means facing the storm outside." Her fingers tightened briefly, the tremble passing to me, her presence a tether in the charged hush. The choice settled then. Heavy, but clear. I covered her hand with mine, the skin meeting in a slow press, warmth spreading like ink on paper. No more words needed. The thread between us held. Loneliness transformed into this raw nearness. We stayed like that, hands linked over the thesis, the office's quiet wrapping us tight. Dawn's first light filtered through the blinds, gray and soft, resolution dawning as we faced what came. Together, boundaries crossed, the pull unbreakable. Dawn's light strengthened, filtering through the blinds in pale shafts that warmed the office's edges. The thesis lay between us, bound and ready, but our hands stayed linked. Sophia's palm steady under mine, the press a quiet anchor against the night's fade. She submitted it that morning, her nod proud as she hit send, but her eyes held the deeper win, the thread we'd woven beyond pages and deadlines. "It's yours now," she said low, voice wrapping the space, her thumb grazing my knuckle once more before withdrawing. The touch echoed, warmth lingering on my skin, pulling me through the day's haze. Walks across the quad turned routine, shoulders brushing in the chill mornings, the campus paths less empty with her beside me. No more solitary treks to class. Her stride matched mine, the faint linen scent cutting the crisp air, her hand occasionally finding my lower back, guiding without words. The town stirred around us. Fields gold under sun, distant trucks rumbling. But our steps synced, the connection solidifying in those small presses, heat building where fabric met. Loneliness receded, the dorm's echo replaced by texts that pulled. "Dinner tonight?" Her home waited beyond campus, a modest house backing the fields, its quiet no longer hollow. Dinners unfolded unhurried, her kitchen a space of shared warmth, counter cluttered with takeout containers and half-read journals. We'd eat side by side at the table, knees touching under wood, her foot hooking mine once in a teasing nudge. "You argue even over flavors," she'd murmur, low laugh threading the air, eyes glinting as she leaned in, fork pausing near my plate. The sultry edge in her tone turned meals intimate, her gaze lingering on my mouth, unflinching, pulling confessions from the day's grind. She'd share fragments, 10 years' weight easing now, dreams of fieldwork she'd shelved for the desk's isolation. "This," she'd say, hand covering mine across the table, fingers interlacing slow, "fills what the quiet took." The hold anchored us, warmth spreading up my arm, the voids we'd named transforming into this steady nearness. Touches grew casual, woven into daily life, her arm around my waist as we crossed the quad, firm and possessive in the wind, or fingers brushing my hair back during a campus event, the grays sparking quiet fire. Sultry comments laced our talks. "That focus in your eyes," she'd whisper during a lecture break, breath warm on my ear. "It undoes me still." The words pulled, weighted with heat, her presence cutting the isolation like sun through mist. My uprooted life steadied, family calls lengthened with mentions of her, the coastal ache fading against this chosen bond. Her guarded past surfaced softer now, partners who fled the small-town grind, leaving echoes she'd filled alone. But nights in her home, bodies close on the couch, her head on my shoulder, the clock's tick shared, not solitary. The thesis graded high, her feedback glowing with pride. But the real shift bloomed in us. Loneliness faded, her hand slipping into mine on campus paths, the world less empty with her grip. What started desperate, a knock in the dark, ended in this. Chosen nearness, her silhouette against the fields at dusk, pulling me home. The bond held, resilient as her guidance, threads of connection weaving through the quiet we'd once feared. Her silhouette stood in morning light by the window, hand extended, the field stretching gold beyond. If you felt this quiet pull from isolation to shared warmth, share your story below. Subscribe for more tales of connections that bridge the alone. Hit that button and join the next one.